Okay, kids, it's that time. It's reading time. The Wuhan cover-up and the terrifying bioweapons arm race. We're reading chapter, I think it's 17. Enter Dr. Fauci. Yeah, chapter 17. Enter Dr. Anthony Fauci. Within 5 months following the anthrax postal incident, it was a bioterrorist attack from the United States against itself from Fort Detrick's. Dr. Fauci had created 2 new sub-agencies to capture his share of the cheese. The NIAID Strategic Plan for Biodefense Research and the NIAID Biodefense Research Agenda for CDC Category A agents, which were those microorganisms designed by CDC to be the higher priority bioweapons relevant pathogens designed as, quote, select agents, end quote. Chill out, dog. To populate the sub-agencies, he assembled a cadre of his loyal deputies and infectious disease principal investigators from the HIV bonanza, where they killed massive numbers of gay people, which they didn't have to kill, which they poisoned them just like they did during the COVID coup. Their mission was to brand contagions as pressing terror threats. Yeah, because we're going to terrorize you with them. Drum up bioweapons panic and lobby the government support for NIAID's new battery of biodefense vaccinations. Oh, God damn it. Stop this shit. Okay. The Pentagon's assault on the vaccine space was both an opportunity and threat to Dr. Fauci and NIAID. Particularly, every veteran federal bureaucrat was jockeying to ride the, quote, war on terror, end quote, which it wasn't. It was a war for terror. Terrorize other countries after you terrorized yourself. Into the high-stakes winner's circle. The military's medical corps, maneuvering for its share of the overwhelming stream of bioterrorism funding, had prompted that each American soldier should receive 75 new vaccines upon enlistment. Oh, that's a good way to kill our service and people. 75 vaccines to cover every potential bioweapon. Fucking insanity. The brass asked President Bush to finance the development of this inoculation fusillade. Not to be outgunned by the military doctors, Dr. Fauci announced in an October 2002 speech that within 10 years, quote, his institute would produce a vaccine, a therapeutic drug, and an adjuvant drug for each of some 24 bioweapons diseases, such as plague and hemorrhagic fever. God, shut up, doggy. According to an article in Scientific America, God, that's so bugging me. One scientist who requested anonymity said that Dr. Fauci told him that the Bush administration had demanded this goal and that he accepted it to prevent the Department of Defense or the Department of Homeland Security from getting the job. Dr. Fauci was openly competing with the military in an escalating campaign to soak the taxpayers using the risk proposed by anthrax as a pretext, which the U.S. created. NIAID's biodefense budget alone increased 6-fold between 2002 and 2003, from $270 million to $1.75 billion. A 2003 NIAID article described the impact of Fauci's new responsibilities. In 2003, NIAID was assigned lead responsibility within the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, and the National Institution of Health, NIH, for civilian biodefense research with the focus on research and early treatment, early development of medical countermeasures against terrorist threats from infectious diseases and radiation exposure. So if we kill our own service people and kill our own Congress people and kill our own postal workers with deadly pathogens that we created in a Fort Detrick's laboratory, we got to protect you from us. You pretend on our protection, still you feed us lies from the tablecloth. Okay, NIAID later assumed responsibility for coordinating the NIH-wide effort to develop medical countermeasures against chemical threats to the civilian population. The article highlights Dr. Fauci's masterstroke of conflating his new biodefense responsibility with NIAID's traditional mission of preventing infectious diseases, which it never does. It just creates more disease. Because new potentially deadly pathogens such as avian influenza may be naturally occurring as well as deliberately introduced by terrorists, NIAID's biodefense research is integrated into its larger emerging and re-emerging infectious disease portfolio. It's like my stocks, my portfolio. I've got all these diseases to profit off of. Great. When no further bioterror attack occurred over the next 10 years because the government didn't do it anymore, Dr. Fauci skillfully maintained his annual billions in biosecurity funding by deftly recalibrating his rhetoric away from bioterrorism hype. Instead, he invoked the new panic of natural but emerging infectious diseases. There's no natural origin. It's all from a laboratory. Okay. Where the hell was I? Okay, here we are. Dr. Fauci's pivot to conflate infectious disease with terrorism proved an inflection point in the militarization of pandemic response and in overcoming the traditional revulsion among Western democracies enshrined in the Nuremberg Code against coercive medical interventions. At this important moment, a fortuitous outbreak of a coronavirus in China helped Dr. Fauci to advance his strategy of interfusing the threat of a bioweapon attack with that of a natural outbreak of infectious disease. So the coronavirus that was released in early 2000 was, of course, U.S. created, just like the second coronavirus. It was an inside job as well. In late 2002, a novel coronavirus. Novel means you made it. I wrote a novel. That means it's an invention. Severe acute respiratory syndrome, SARS, appeared in the Guangdong region of China and spread quickly, eventually killing some 774 people worldwide. However, according to then U.S. State Department senior Chinese policy advisor Miles Yu, Chinese officials privately suspected that the original 2002 SARS was a U.S. engineered pathogen. Of course it was. We know that. The Chinese government attributed the 2002 SARS outbreak to zoonotic spillover from bats and civet cats. C-I-V-E-T, civet cats. I never heard that one. Subsequently, several small SARS outbreaks between 2003 and 2006 were persuasively linked to, quote, isolated laboratory outbreaks, end quote. Of course it was. Gain of function research. Even the most vocal PPR advocate, I forget what PPR stands for. Anyway, even the most vocal PPR advocate agree that the source of the SARS outbreak of 2004 was a Chinese lab leak. The government was shocked by the initial outbreak, you told me, quote, and they began an obsession with studying viruses, end quote. Despite its anemic death toll, means very little death, the SARS coronavirus outbreak between 2002 and 2004 were nonetheless a godsend to Dr. Fauci. I first arrived in Japan in 2004, so people were talking about getting that vaccine, and my boss at my work got it and his wife, and they couldn't get pregnant for like 10 years. But I did some energy healing on them, and they got pregnant the next week or month or so. I can't remember. The NIAID director ignored the most compelling caveat from those incidents, the fact that coronavirus lab escapes in China, Singapore, and Taiwan had precipitated several of the outbreaks. Fauci boasted in 2011, quote, "Though the anthrax response, we build both a physical and an intellectual infrastructure that can be used to respond to a broad range of emerging health threats." He never says anything that makes any sense. Just sounds all fucking wordy. Dr. Fauci thus put his agency's efforts against all infectious disease on a par with war, institutionalizing the militarized response to disease outbreaks and laying the groundwork for the PPR is preparedness and response, pandemic preparedness and response. PPR. Look at that. Institutionalizing the military response to disease outbreaks and laying the groundwork for the martial culture of pandemic preparedness and response, PPR. In the future, NIAID would draw no distinction between biodefense and infectious disease research. By that time, the escalating intramural arms race to capture Pentagon, CIA, BARDA, DARPA, and HHS biosecurity funding was pulling the military, CIA, and NIAID deeper and deeper into the dicey alchemy of, quote, gain-of-function research, end quote, that would ultimately culminate inside the BSL-4 Pandora's box in Wuhan. So BSL-4 is a high-level biosecurity lab. That means it's a military lab. These are bioweapons production facilities. More secrecy. NIAID's new biodefense responsibility, classified and unclassified, legitimized the veil of secrecy that would cloak much of Dr. Fauci's research over the next 2 decades. Departing from the traditional transparency that is the hallmark of public health management, NIH would thereafter treat grant applications and correspondence under the rubric of national security. As a result, most information about biological weapons is classified. Dr. Fauci's actual budget for biodefense is difficult to determine. Only a handful of senior representatives on defense appropriations committees have a, quote, need to know, end quote. And Dr. Fauci has taken full advantage of asserting the need for secrecy and the freedom from accountability that accompanied diminished scrutiny, according to biological and chemical weapons experts Jonathan Tucker. I'm going to read what Tucker says in a moment. Okay, no relation, I'm sure, to the newscaster Tucker Carlson. Oh, that's his last name, not his first name. Okay, it's almost 2:22. In 1 minute, it's going to be my birthday. 2:22. Okay, here's what Jonathan Tucker says, weapons expert, chemical weapons expert. Only 5 members of the House Appropriations Committee and no more than 5% of the entire House of Representatives were cleared for information on chemical and biological weapons. As a result, a small clique of senior congressmen was able to allocate money for these programs in secret session and then bury the line item in massive appropriations bills that were brought to the floor for a vote with little advance notice so that few members had time to read them. To emphasize NIAID's new status as a quasi-military agency, Vice President Cheney placed his powerful chief of staff, Scooter Libby, quote, in NIAID headquarters in Washington to function as a kind of political commissar from the vice president's office. This gave Dr. Fauci unparalleled access to not just Cheney, but also President Bush, to whom he had an open channel. According to award-winning historian and author Ashley Rinsberg, quote, Fauci now had a virtual carte blanche to not merely approve but design and run the kind of research projects he sought, and could do so with no oversight structure above him. Biodefense projects that formerly would have fallen under the authority of military or intelligence agencies were now under his direct supervision, end quote. From that date to the present, NIAID has received approximately $2.1 billion of its $6.5 billion annual budget, specifically earmarked for biodefense and emerging infectious disease research. Following Shiro Ishii's blueprint, Dr. Fauci launched his biodefense work by distributing lucre from his annual treasure trove of academic consortia, most notably at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, University of California at Davis, Harvard, University of Texas at Galveston, University of Pennsylvania, Boston University, Vanderbilt University, and the University of Wisconsin. I wonder if Vanderbilt's related to Gloria Vanderbilt, the mother of CIA plant Cooper. What's his name? Anthony Cooper? No, God, what the fuck's his name? Anderson Cooper. Who names their kid a fucking last name? Anderson. That's a fucking last name. That's not a first name. Anderson Cooper. I got 2 last names. I don't use Vanderbilt, though, so you know I'm a freaking senator's son. I was a billionaire's son. Dr. Fauci personally benefited from this new funding stream. In October 2021, Forbes magazine reported that HHS awarded Dr. Fauci a 68% permanent pay hike in 2004 to, quote, appropriately compensate him for the level of responsibility, especially as it relates to his work on biodefense research activity, end quote. At the time of his retirement in January 2023, Dr. Fauci's annual emolument, which means his pay, was $456,312. That's just his on-record pay, not his under-the-counter pay. Reflected that 2004 compensation bump, which for 2 decades had sustained his status as the highest paid government official in American history. Dr. Fauci's wage was higher than any congressional representative, senator, Supreme Court justice, 5-star general, or any other of his fellow 4.3 million federal employees. For comparison, the president's yearly paycheck in 2023 was $400,000, so he made more than that just in his reportable salary. Dr. Fauci's salary jump gave him a personal stake in continuing bioweapons research and permanently coddled Dr. Fauci as these perilous sorcerers. Coddled Dr. Fauci to these perilous sorcerers. Quote, this salary jump was only a byproduct of the radical restructuring of America's biodefense apparatus, end quote, according to Ashley Rinsberg. Quote, the much more significant outcome was that Fauci was essentially placed at the top of a new chain of command. We went up and down the chain of command, he said in Congress. That means he basically says what to do and everyone does it. Over which he gained nearly total decision-making ability. He went from being the director of one of NIH's constituent 27 institutes to being the only one who really mattered. NIH distributes some $30 billion in funding annually to some 56,000 grant recipients, mainly at universities and research labs. This largesse gives Dr. Fauci and the NIH director, then Francis Collins, control over the careers and livelihoods of many of the world's top scholars, a power they would leverage to orchestrate the COVID cover-up. 2004 Project BioShield Act. As the anthrax attacks transitioned our military forces away from Islamic terrorism and made the biosecurity agenda the official spear tip of U.S. foreign policy, the global vaccine program became the covert instrument of U.S. power. The neocons continued to build their strategy and physical bulwark for a massive bioweapons arms race. The prestigious universities that profit from Dr. Fauci's largesse have demonstrated their gratitude with various awards, degrees, and other burnishments of Dr. Fauci's own scientific credentials. His trophy case includes some 58 honorary degrees, an unwritten, I don't know what this freaking French word is, droit, D-R-O-I-T, droit, do is the middle D-U, and then S-E-I-G-N-E-U-R, whatever. Droit de Gru. He always uses military. He uses French and Italian and Greek and Latin for legal terms, I guess. I don't know what the fuck this means. Apparently accompanies his power to fund research in the form of a claim to co-authorship of papers he funds. Dr. Fauci has not been bashful about exacting this prize. His name appears as author, co-author, or editor on some 1,300 peer-reviewed studies. For most of these, he presumably wrote little or nothing more than his signature on a check. He is, as a result of his 1,000-plus honorary authorships, the 44th most cited living researcher, which he hasn't done anything but grease the wheels of propaganda and terrible research. So the most cited living researcher per 2022 analysis of Google scholarship citations. In 2004, President George W. Bush formalized Dr. Fauci's hegemony over bioweapons spending within America's public health bureaucracy with the passage of the Project BioShield Act. Fucking stupid laws. That statute put Dr. Fauci in charge of the modernization and constitution of biomedical and behavioral research facilities. The national press ignored the momentous fact that this meant reopening and expanding the bioweapons research laboratories that Richard Nixon shuttered in 1969. One good thing Richard Nixon did. The Defense Department's multi-billion-dollar annual financial felicities to NIAID and NIH allowed Dr. Fauci to construct 4 maximum-level biosecurity BSL-4 labs to handle the most dangerous pathogens at the University of Texas Galveston, at Boston University, at Fort Detrick, which is the one who released anthrax on the Congress, and at Rocky Mountain Laboratory in Montana, and to plan 13 other BSL-3 labs at UC Davis, at UPenn, as well as other lucky campuses across the United States. 13 of them. The murky cloud of secrecy that cloaks everything biosecurity makes is difficult to even determine how many BSL-3 and BSL-4 labs are currently operational in the United States. NIH and NIAID contend that there are 4 BSL labs operating in the United States. UPMC Center for Health Security, formerly Center for Biosecurity of UPMC, lists 11. So he says there's 4. The publications say there's 11. The Federation of American Scientists, FAS, has counted 13. The University of North Carolina counts 15. The number of BSL-3 labs in the U.S. is completely unknown. A Government Accountability Office, GAO, reports that no federal agency maintains a comprehensive list of BSL-3 facilities and estimates that the number is well over 1,000. So we live in the most dangerous place in the world with all these BSL-3 labs and BSL-4 labs that are off the books. Dr. Fauci called his new labs Center of Excellence for Biodefense and Emerging Infectious Disease Research. Fucking shit, come on. I'm gonna change the speed of this motherfucker. Let's go to 777. Okay, save that. See that? Change the speed and bam. Got a deal. Is it a deal I even want though? 330? Loma Square? Okay, it's less than an hour. Okay, Google, 42 divided by 1.5. Not this one. Didn't want to do it. Anyway, I'll do that one. It's an hour and a half for $42. It's just down the road. They don't usually give me too many packages, 1 or 2 stops. I'll do it. Okay, kids, I gotta go. My roommate's moved out yesterday. Still got stuff there though. Loma Square. It takes 11 minutes to get there. Are they going to have me go down University Avenue? Okay. I usually go the other way. But that's alright. I can go anyway. Okay, what was I reading before I got Okay, so they estimate that the number is well over 1,000 BSL-3 lab facilities. BSL-4 is the most dangerous one. BSL-3 is the next down the line. Dr. Fauci called his new labs Centers of Excellence for Biodefense and Emerging Infectious Disease Research. Damn, what a fucking long-ass name. Media critics and more prudent scientists question the need for all these new high containment facilities. Over 700 scientists formerly protested the gargantuan allocations for a perilous sort of research that seemed certain to distort public health priorities by diverting brains and resources away from healing and into weapons production and other military preoccupations. Even more concerning, this new focus seemed as likely to unfetter the apocalyptic horsemen of pestilence and plague as a protest, as to protect Americans from biological attack. Yeah, when they own countries, the only one that's ever attacked them. Oh, disgusting. The guy should be in jail and all of his cohorts. And if Robert F. Kennedy gets elected, that's going to be the first task. Take them all to court. Put them in jail. Save the planet from any more pandemics.